Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And, so nice to see people we haven't seen in a while. We got Steve here. Where's Steve-O? Steve, we haven't seen him in a while. And Leah and David are here, and we hadn't seen them in a while. That's just wonderful things. So great. Listen, 3 weeks ago, I began what likely will be a 3-part series, we'll see, on the servant of the Lord, which we find the majority of the text in Isaiah 53. But I wanted to frame it for you a little bit differently, because I'm not interested particularly in showing how Yeshua fits the prophecies that are embedded in this passage. And we know Yeshua is the one man Israel, and he epitomizes this whole idea of the servant of the Lord. And we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not going to go back there. But here's what I do want to focus on. It's a short verse. I did teach it to you last time, and maybe we'll review it real quickly. But it's a verse that says something about God, and by extension, about Messiah, who's, in the image, the spitting image of his Father. So when we learn about Yeshua, we learn about the God of Israel, because there's that connection between them and a kind of unity. We call God a unique unity. That's a good way to put it. But here's the verse I shared with you from the book of Isaiah, and it goes like this: Bekol tzara'at lo tsar. Why don't we try saying it together? We'll do it slowly. Bekol tzara'at lo tsar. Now that word tzara'at actually is borrowed by Yiddish speakers, and I remember when we were kids, and my parents didn't speak much Yiddish at home, my grandparents did, but you talk about tsuris. How many of you have heard the term tsuris? Oh, this tsuris. If the Music Man musical had the song Trouble in River City, but it was done by Jews, it would be there's tsuris in River City. That's how we could look at it, Tsuris means trouble, so you hear the same concept of tsar. It's a loan word from Hebrew into Yiddish, and so we talk about tsuris. It means trouble. It means big trouble. And so notice what this verse says. Bekol tzaratam, in all of their trouble and their affliction, lo, he was afflicted, meaning God. Now, this is a magnificent concept, because we just heard one tough Haftorah passage with God's judgment. And it is true that God is a judge, and that's just the way it is. And he doesn't put up with people who break his covenant, and it's remedial. He's always trying to get us to do the right thing. It's not just to punish us, but nonetheless, when you read Isaiah and when you read Jeremiah, it could be pretty tough, being kicked out of your country and suffering, a lot of suffering. So we understand that, but it's not the whole story. You see, because Bekol tzaratam lo tsar, in all of their afflictions, even those which are self-imposed, even which is the result of judgment, it says that he was afflicted. And this is a magnificent concept that I'd like to explore as we go through Isaiah 53. So I'm going to talk through the passage with you, and again, not going to spend a lot of time demonstrating fulfilled prophecy. It's all there. It's so exciting that, it's why many of us are Messianic Jews, because of the picture of Messiah that's presented in Tanakh, which really fits this real guy, Yeshua, and we're thrilled about that. So here we begin, and I'm just reviewing a little bit here, because Isaiah 53 really begins at the end of Isaiah 52. So what do we read? We read, Behold, my servant shall act wisely. He will be high and exalted and lifted up. Yarum v'nasav gava ma'od. Oh, this is great. The servant, Israel, and Israel's embodiment, Yeshua, exalted, lifted. Oh, what fun. Isn't that wonderful? Then next verse, talked about this last time. As many were astonished at you, his appearance was so marred beyond human semblance, and his form beyond that of the children of mankind. Whoa. Next verse, beaten to a pulp, unrecognizable as a person. Wow. If you want to talk about tsuris, that is tsuris. All right? But there's a purpose in it. It says, so shall he sprinkle many nations. We talked about that word sprinkle, nazah. It's used 23 times in Leviticus. It's a ritual cleansing of the altar by the Kohen Gadol taking, or the Kohanim actually during the year, taking their finger, putting it in this bowl where there was the animal's blood, and then paradoxically ritually cleansing the altar and the holy utensils and everything. Okay, so it's a picture of ritual sacrifice. And again, although we're not emphasizing it, it really fits Yeshua well. Now, I know that some of your versions say, so how he shall startle many nations. All right, it's a possible meaning of the word nazah, but it's not common, and it doesn't fit what happens next. It says, kings will shut their mouths at him, because that which they had not been told, for that which had not been told them they will see, and that which they have not heard they will understand. So it says that when they understand who the servant is, they're not startled, because when you're startled, which way does your mouth go? Closed or open? Open. That's right. So it's obviously not the word. It doesn't fit the image at all. He sprinkled many nations. Speaks of the work of Yeshua again. Okay, Isaiah 53, the prophet asks, who has believed what he heard from us, and to whom has the arm, the Zeroah, the arm of the Lord been revealed? That's a picture of God's strength. And he's asking a question. Who gets this? Who gets this? For he grew up before him as a young plant, a shoresh. For those of you who know Hebrew, the root is the shoresh. He grew up before him like a young plant, and like a shoresh, a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by people, by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Again, what's the operative word? Tsuris. Big trouble. The servant of the Lord doesn't stay exalted. He's beaten to a pulp, crushed, rejected, etc. And as one from whom men hide their face, he was despised and we esteemed him not. A probable allusion to a leper. People hide their face. Get away, get out of here. You're talking about big trouble. The servant of the Lord really, really does suffer a lot. Now, but there's a redemptive purpose. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him smitten by God and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. So there's a redemptive purpose to the suffering of the servant of the Lord. It has meaning. It's not service for its own sake. It's not because God is a big meanie who just wanted to blast him. No, that's not it at all. There is this redemptive purpose of his being treated the way he was. He, again, pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. And then Isaiah speaks of Israel. All we, like sheep, have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Again, that redemptive purpose. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Now here we have a courtroom scene. That's what this is. This is a courtroom scene. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. There's that concept, mishpat, judgment. It's a courtroom scene. And he's being accused. And instead of saying anything, in order to fulfill the purposes of God for the servant, he just stays quiet. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, and as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people, Isaiah says. And then he says, this is such a wonderful, it is kind of an indication about Yeshua, it's really quite profound. I'll just mention it. And they made his grave with a wicked man. The singular participle, those of you in the advanced Hebrew class, you know what I'm talking about. It's a rich man. They made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man in his death. You know the story of Yeshua. You know how that all turned out. Amazing providence. Do you think that Pilate and the Roman soldiers and the complicit among our own people were saying, oh, there's a prophecy fulfilled, let's do this right. Let's make sure that we intend to bury him on Boot Hill, but instead let's pick on some rich guy to put him in his tomb. No, that's not the way it worked. It was strictly providential, God's orchestration of circumstances. And if we have the eyes to see it, we're amazed by it. Okay. Now he did this, although there was no violence, and although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him, and he has put him to grief. When his soul makes an asham, we saw that word today in the Haftorah reading, in the Torah reading, an asham, chapter 5, chapter 6 of Leviticus, different kinds of offerings. An asham is often called a guilt offering. It has a non-specific purpose in terms of how it's used in the sacrificial system in the Mishkan, but nonetheless, it's very closely associated with sin and guilt. So he becomes a guilt offering for Israel. And when he does that, he shall see his offspring, he shall prolong his days. Wait a minute, I thought he was dead. Well, he was dead, but he didn't stay dead. If that sounds familiar, you know why, okay? The Lord will prolong his ways. The will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. Out of the anguish of his soul, he shall see and be satisfied. God will be satisfied by this atoning work of the Asham, the servant of the Lord. By his knowledge shall the righteous one, my servant, God says, make many to be accounted righteous, and he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will divide him a portion with the many, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul to death and was numbered with the transgressors, yet he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. Quite a picture. Does that thrill you? I hope it does. It should thrill you, because it's amazing. This was written 800 years before Yeshua. All good. But again, my main purpose this morning is not to reassure us or remind us again about his identity primarily. It's great, it's fantastic. I hope it thrills you. But there is another purpose that I'm bringing this up to you, and it has to do, B'kol saratam lo tsar. In all their afflictions, he was afflicted. That's really the purpose of why we're getting into this today. So the point is, life has tsuris. Would you agree with that? I mean, we think about Ukraine right now, and let me just say, one of the scariest things I heard, and there's various ways of understanding the Ukraine situation. I'm certainly not going to get into it with you. I'm struck by the monolithically anti-Russian narrative that seems to predominate, but I'm not so sure about that. But anyhow, what we really focus on is the suffering of thousands of people who were displaced from their homes, because war is horrible, absolutely horrible. But let me tell you, talk about tsuris. So I'm listening to a broadcast of the president of Ukraine talking to our Congress, and everyone is very behind him, et cetera, et cetera. And then it becomes suggested, let's have a no-fly zone. and I'm thinking to myself, no-fly zone? You want to invite World War III real quick? Just have a no-fly zone and let there be an accident where something occurs. I'm saying there is tsuris. You know there's tsuris. What does gas cost now? Right? I even think, I hope people will still come to services. Listen, if you need help, let us know. I'm serious about that. I'm very serious. Rabbi Nathan, I know, would be utterly amenable here to this service. And then the whole corona thing that we've been, I don't want to bring you down, but the point is that life has tsuris. That's the way it is. That's the way life is. Life has uncertainty. Life has tsuris. There's personal sickness, et cetera, et cetera. But I want you to remember through all of it, I want you to remember Isaiah's comforting words. In all their affliction, he says of Israel, and we can say by extension to the world, because God loves all the boys and girls in the world, right? In all their afflictions, it's not just that he has orchestrated some of these for the sake of bringing us back to him. It's not just that he's allowing human freedom to operate. That is true, and that's why there is trouble in the world. He's not causing it, but it's the almost inevitable result of him giving human beings freedom to make decisions, including bad ones. And so we have a lot of bad ones. That's not really the main point I'm trying to make. We understand all that. But what we want to recognize is that as evidenced by the life and death and resurrection of the servant, the quintessential ultimate servant, the Lord, Yeshua, that what we see is something deeper. God absorbing in himself, in this case it's representative, his son, absorbing in himself the pain, the pathos, the emotion, the feeling of our lives and our situation. He feels it. Get a hold of that. It's amazing. Sure, punishment may be necessary. It's remedial. It has its purposes. He's trying to bring up, but he feels it. He felt, in the case of Isaiah, he felt the pain of the Assyrian forces coming into Jerusalem and taking us away. He feels it. He felt it. And he feels our situation too. And so, we Messianic Jews and other believers, all other believers among us, are incredibly blessed. And I want to tell you why. And this is the cash value. If you don't get anything else today, this is what I want you to remember. Because we know the most profound, historically genuine demonstration of God's affliction offered on behalf of our people and all people was the life, the death, the resurrection of Yeshua the Messiah. What we get is not some vague idea to help us feel better as we navigate the minefield of life. No, what we have is the historical, real demonstration, epitomized, made clearest and most profound and wonderful. You can get a hold of it, you can hold it, you can live out of it. God suffers along with his creation. And what does that mean? That means that his goodness is far bigger and better and more wonderful. Find another philosophy of life that you can buy into, that has the creator of the universe, infinitely powerful, infinitely wise, also in that infinite power and wisdom, not detaching himself from the human experience, little people living on a little blue dot. And he says, the prophet says, in all their affliction, he was afflicted. Wow. So, I offer this by way of encouragement to all of us. And I want to ask you, have you said yes to him? That is, to the Mashiach. Have you surrendered to him? Have you said, listen, this is just too good to miss? I am going to believe in the God of the Scripture, the God of Israel, and I am going to surrender to him through Yeshua the Messiah. And I want to tell you, when you do, and the Ruach brings into you that sense of well-being and peace, and even though bullets are flying, and even though I don't know how I'm going to take care of this or that, the peace of God and his smile is on you because he gets it. He gets what you're all about. He likes you. He's with you. And in even your affliction, he becomes afflicted. But that's not the end of the story, because as we understand, one day all will be made very well in this world. And so I just want to leave you with the exhortation, walk with him and let's walk with one another. Shabbat shalom, everybody.